Well, thank you, Ann. If you're like me, you look at all those moving parts on Medicare and you go, how am I going to remember all this? Well, you probably won't, but that's why you have handouts and why you can look on web pages and why you can call people like HR or Ann, because as you think about these and start putting the pieces together for yourself, there will be more questions, no doubt, and that's okay. As we move into this next section, we're going to cover some of the human resources, ways to help you prepare, some of the plans that we have here at Seattle Pacific. Listen, we're going to connect the dots a little bit on several things that Ann just talked about. We're going to cover long-term care insurance very quickly. Hopefully that's familiar to you already. We're going to talk about the Emeriti Retirement Health Solutions Plan. You're going to see how that connects with what she talked about with Medicare. We're going to talk about the health savings account option that's now available if you're on their high deductible health plan, one of the two health medical plans here at SPU. We're going to talk a little bit about life insurance, accidental death, and dismemberment. And then we'll conclude by talking just a little bit about long-term disability insurance. So there are several of these points that have some connections to what Ann just talked about. So help me connect the dots as we go along. So there we're going to talk about those. Long-term care, Emeriti, health savings account, life insurance, and long-term disability. So long-term care insurance. You might recall that this is one of those things that Ann mentioned is not covered under Medicare, is your long-term care. And so what is long-term care? It's that custodial care that is available if you have a long-term care plan to help you with what they call activities of daily living. If you lose, or you or a loved one loses your own ability to care for these activities of daily living, and they list some of these here: bathing, toileting, transferring, eating, dressing, continence, and other kinds of things. So you can see how having some care for someone in this condition is pretty important, and it's not covered under Medicare. The care that normally is offered is either in a long-term care facility, which is what we normally think of. You're going to a care facility, but it also could include home visits by some of these, there's whole new industries now of groups that will come and visiting nurses type programs that will come to your home and help with these very activities of daily living types of care. Those are covered under long-term care plans. We do have a plan here at SPU. Many people are covered on it. It's a voluntary plan. It's through the UNUM. And so you would pay for it. I won't have a show of hands, but I have a feeling there are a few people in this room that are on this plan. And it's helpful. It's strictly voluntary. It's not something paid for by SPU, but it's provided as a group policy. You can get long-term care individual plans out there in the marketplace, but they tend to be more expensive. We do have this as a available policy. You can get it separate from SPU if you want to, but the rates that we have here, okay, we'll get to that in just a second. Some of the questions about, well, why should you consider long-term care? We'll cover a couple of these here. One we've already mentioned, that Medicare doesn't provide this. Another is that Medicaid may provide this. If you know the difference between Medicare and Medicaid, Medicaid is something that would only kick in if you're basically indigent. And so if you've used up all of your savings to the point, you know, in caring for these kind of long-term care needs, to the point where you are down to, I believe it's only a few $1,000s, then Medicaid may kick in. Obviously, we would prefer most of us not to have to get to that point. So having a long-term care plan is to your advantage. Most of us, as we think about retirement planning, and we're going to hear more about that later in the evening, at least as I think about retirement planning, I'm thinking about paying for my housing and my food and my automobile and some insurances and maybe some travel. I don't think about, gee, did I also save enough to care for what could be a long-term care expense in my life? Most of us don't tend to think that way in our actual retirement plan. So that's why long-term care is a very good supplement in addition to your retirement planning.
There you mentioned UNUM. UNUM has gotten out of the Washington market. At least I have received quite a number of notices. What is that all?
Well, they're not out of the Washington market because we still have them. They may be restricting new business in Washington. There are a couple of other large nationwide carriers that did get completely out of the market. So you're correct on that. And I'll show you in just a minute, the UNUM's rates are going up. So, but we do still have a plan with UNUM. So correct, because we are an existing policy holder. This is just a few statistics that Carrie pulled up from some other publications. Just to put it in context, average cost of nursing home, and this was back in 2010, was $83,000 a year, and I assume that's a live-in situation in full care. Obviously, there's grades of that you may or may not need, but it gets expensive if you end up in a situation where that's the kind of care that you need. Another statistic that kind of surprised me, 70% of Americans over the age of 65 will require some type of long-term care service during their lifetime. Again, it may be something as simple as a visiting nurse that helps you with something at home. It could be all the way up to full care live-in situation. So most of us have a fairly high likelihood of needing something along these lines at some point. And then that 56% of couples spending their income down to poverty level, that's where that Medicaid kicks in that we mentioned. That statistic's a little bit old, so I'd like to see if I can get that updated, but still that's a bit sobering to think about. So having the opportunity to buy into a long-term care plan is something that you should consider. Why now instead of later? And we say this to younger people as well. But SPU's plan is based on the age at the time that you apply, and that particular age band and that you start paying when you first apply and are qualified is what you'll continue to pay over the years. With the exception, and that's in the bottom print, and this is kind of what I think you may have been hearing about, UNUM has applied for and been granted a rate increase of 25% that will take place this year. So if you're currently on the long-term care plan, the rates are going up in June. And most of you should have already received information about this, if you remember receiving it or not, with all the many things that no doubt come across your desk or your home mail. But the rates are going up. They requested, by the way, a 75% increase. And the Washington Insurance Commission said, no, we'll give you 25%. Now, that doesn't mean they can't come back a year later and ask for more. Now, one reason, and we looked at the numbers on this, one reason is because UNUM had not raised their rates in 15 years, I think, 10 or 15 years. They were actually way behind the curve for any other long-term care insurance carrier. Frankly, personally, I wish they had maybe made incremental increases over the years instead of giving us such a big increase all at once, but this is what it is. So those of you that are currently on long-term care, just be reminded that that rate increase is coming. If you're considering getting long-term care, I can show you what the rates are now, but the rates are going to be different come June. So just, again, be aware. Doesn't mean it's not worth it. Just be aware that it will be different. And you can shop the market, and you would probably still find that UNUM's rates are very competitive. They've been under market for quite some time. It's just a big pill to swallow all at once. One other thing that may or may not affect anybody in this room is that with our plan that we have with UNUM, we're allowed what's called a guaranteed issue, or I think Ann in the Medicare world called it, you didn't need the medical underwriting. Guaranteed issue simply means that they're not going to ask you the medical questions if you enroll within a certain period of time. And in our case, it's only for new employees. So within that first year after you're hired on, so if that applies to anybody here, you can actually get this long-term care insurance with no questions asked. You just sign up and start paying the premiums. If it's beyond that point, or you want to start making changes like to the amount beyond that point, there could be medical questionnaire asked. So if you're currently good and healthy and you're brand new and are thinking about signing up for something like this, this is a great time, because you could probably, well, you can't guarantee what your health will be like in the future. So I think this is all on your handout if you have questions. By the way, almost all this information is also on the Human Resources website, and so you're welcome to call and ask or look for further information there. Now, Emeriti Retirement Health Solutions. There probably are some Emeriti or soon-to-be Emeriti faculty in the room. That's not what we're talking about. This is a confusing title and name for this plan, but it's the Emeriti Retirement Health Solutions. And this is a plan that is provided by SPU and is paid for by SPU that allows money to be set aside very much like a retirement plan. Now, while you're employed, month by month by month, money is put into to this plan, and you can actually choose from different investments, very much like a 403B plan. This, so while you're employed, how Emeriti works is that that's the money-saving years. SPU right now is putting in, I think well, I'll get to it. I thought that was up here. I think we're putting in around $81 to maybe $84 a month right now for each employee that's eligible. And you can also put your own money into it. But in your case, if you put your own money in, much like, again, a 403B, it's after tax with the Emeriti plan. So it'd be more like a Roth in that case. So this is an after-tax for yours, or pre-tax if it's the employer's money, way to save money for post-retirement medical needs. So none of this money can be used until you've qualified as retired. But there's two ways that it can be used. One is to gain access to a guaranteed issue Medicare supplement or Medicare Advantage plan. Okay, back to some things that Ann was talking about. So built into the Emeriti plan is Medicare supplement plans, and they have it through Aetna. If you've looked closely at the Emeriti materials, this will be familiar. If you're not, then be aware that this is part of the Emeriti plan, that if you're an employee over age 35 and have worked here at least a year, you already have money being put into this Emeriti plan. That money can go towards paying the premiums for an Advantage or supplement plan after you retire. So that dovetails with some of the things Ann was talking about. The other way that money can be spent is much like a flexible spending account, that the cash that's in that account, again, after retirement, can be used to pay for out-of-pocket expenses. So the co-pays, any kind of out-of-pocket expense that you normally would use a flexible spending account for, you can use these Emeriti funds. So either the premiums or the out-of-pocket. So that's after retirement. Okay, we've already covered that. We did a quick, just a quick rate for our zip code here, 98119. And you've got some traditional choice medical, which is an Advantage type plan, I believe. And you see the rates by different ages. And it tends to be a bit more expensive than the supplement plans. You've got Supplement K and Supplement L, which are a little bit, they're filling in the gaps, but they're not all encompassing. So again, as Ann mentioned, there's a couple different kinds of Medicare supplement or Medicare Advantage plans. You don't have to use this one that's provided through Emeriti, and it's through Aetna. The money that's in your Emeriti plan, you could choose to go out to the market and open all that mail that's going to come your way and use your Emeriti funds to pay the premiums for any supplement or Advantage plan. But there is one built in that you can also use through Aetna. There's also drug plans and a dental PPO plan that's available through the Emeriti plan as well. So through the website, you can go on and calculate your rates if you want, based on either where you live now or you're thinking about retiring in Palm Springs. You can look at the rates down there and see what the rates might be and say, well, maybe I won't retire in Palm Springs. Let's choose someplace else. Or maybe they're great rates. I don't know. I didn't look that one up. Okay, here's where I talk about the yes, SPU right now is contributing about $81 a month, which is nearly $1,000 a year to this plan. If you haven't been paying attention or haven't gotten online and looked recently, you well could have $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 in there, and that's a good start. We've only had this plan for, I want to say, about 7 or 8 years. So it's fairly new. There's nobody here that's had a lifetime of savings been put into this, but it's something, and it's a good start, and again, you can be putting your own money into it as well. By the way, you can continue putting your own money into it even after you retire, if you'd like, if that's a way to save for your future medical that you don't really need yet. There's no limit on the amount of money that you can put in this. This is called a VEBA. That's the kind of saving vehicle that's behind the Emeriti plan. There's really no limit. So there's a limit on how much SPU is going to put in, but there's no limit on how much you're going to put in, if you so choose. Couple of things to pay attention to on this. With the Emeriti plan, it's kind of a cliff vesting situation. So you have to have been 7 years of service, and then you're 100% vested in this plan. If you've been working at SPU less than 7 years, then you have 0. So it's all or nothing, and at 7 years is when you become fully vested, which is different than the retirement plans and other things. There are some fees associated with the Emeriti plan, but for active employees right now, SPU is pretty much picking up all of them, including something new. If you look at your statements that you get from TIAA-CREF, you'll notice that there have been fees from SABITS and from TIAA-CREF. Starting in March, SPU is going to start paying those for you as well. That's a new decision. So you can say thank you to our administration for picking up some additional costs there and saving you. Any questions on any of the emeriti plan? It's something we probably don't talk about quite enough, and it may not be as familiar to you, so I'm happy to entertain any broad questions. Yes, ma'am.
Could you go over the forfeitures?
Oh, actually, okay, and there's another chart I think that shows it as well, just as well, but basically this means that the funds that are in this account have different things that happen to them depending on whether it's your money or SPU's money that was put in, and depending on who's available to get the money, whether it's a spouse, a dependent, or what they call last to die. There's nobody left in your immediate dependents, then the money reverts to the plan. Correct. But that's only after you've had every chance to use it and you're no longer here, and your spouse has had every chance to use it and they're no longer here, and any other immediate dependent has had every chance to use it and they're no longer available. So the money stays in your account through all of those people, and only after that would it revert back to the plan. Does that pretty much answer it? Okay. Yes, sir.
I think you answered it just a minute ago, but this covers the employee and the spouse that is not an employee. Is that correct? Like the question?
Yes, correct. Yeah, you can use money on either person, a spouse or dependent, tax dependent. Yes. Yeah.
The last 5 words on the forfeiture section, contributors in ratio to contribution. In other words, if when a person retires, they put in 90% of the money and SPU's put in 10, or vice versa, then if at the end of the life of the two spouses and there's still money left, some of it would forfeit, and some of it would not, or would all be forfeit.
Some of it will forfeit just to the plan in general, and that's the employer money that was put in, if it's still there after all the people have passed on. If it's money that you put in personally, your own contributions, and there's still some of that money left in after all those people have passed on, what that means is that it's going to be reverting not just to the plan in general, but to all participants that are still in the plan based on their level of participation. So that's not happened so far, but I suppose it could. Again, we haven't had the plan that long. That's just how the plan is set up. It's one of those things we don't tend to think about that much either, but it's nice to know that, in a sense, if you don't end up using it and your immediate family doesn't end up using it, it does go back to help other people through SPU. So, okay, let's talk a second about health savings account, and then I'm actually going to do a little bit of side-by-side between health savings account and that emeriti plan we just talked about. I think most of you know that this health savings account is brand new. We've only had it since July, so we're in the first year. The health savings account itself is like a fund mechanism attached to a high deductible medical plan. So we still have our old PPO plan that's a $500 deductible, and you pay a little premium every month, and then you have co-pays and whatnot when you go to the doctor. We also have a new plan that's the high deductible plan, $2,000 for an individual, $4,000 for a family. And associated with that high deductible plan is this HSA, or health savings account. It actually functions fairly similar to the old flexible spending account, FSA, that you might have had when you had a PPO plan. So it's a funding mechanism only associated with a high deductible plan. So you have to think, well, does this apply to me or not? If you have the high deductible plan, then you are allowed to have a health savings account. If you don't have a high deductible plan, you can't have a health savings account. This first year, SPU, as most of you know that are on the high deductible plan, has made fairly significant contributions to the HSA on your behalf. In fact, it totals to $1,900, I believe it is. So it's only about $100 or so short of the full deductible. So by the end of the year, that's how much money SPU will have put into this HSA account if you're on that plan. So you essentially have only a $100 deductible this first year. And it was a way of getting us started. It's very generous because the base is that SPU is going to fund on an ongoing base at least half the deductible, which is only $1,000 out of the $2,000. So in this case, the first year we funded quite a bit more. Our friends with Aon, who are our brokers for our medical plans, are a little jealous because they also have a high deductible plan with an HSA, but they don't get any funding for theirs. So they're looking over here at us at SPU and going, you guys have it pretty well. Maybe I'll come work at SPU. So You can make contributions yourself in addition to what SPU is putting in, and these are pre-tax dollars. These can grow tax-free, and then they can be spent tax-free as long as they're spent only on approved medical-related expenses, much like the flexible spending account. So in that sense, it's the same. However, you cannot participate in this HSA if you are on a flexible spending account, or your spouse is, or you're a covered dependent on a spouse's non-high deductible plan, or if you're enrolled in Medicare. So coming back to some things again that we heard about Medicare, while you're still employed, you're on our plan here, you don't need to be covered on Medicare anyway. And particularly if you want to participate in the HSA, you also don't want to be on Medicare. So if you were to sign up for Medicare and also be on our plan, you could be on the high deductible plan, but you cannot have money put into the HSA for you, either your money or ours. So those are some connecting the dots kinds of things that you have to think about. So if you're considering what should I do, please ask good questions before you make your decisions. The funds that are in this HSA can be used, like I said, for medical expenses now, but because this is one difference between this and the FSA, the flexible spending account, with an HSA, that money rolls over. You don't lose it at the end of the year. It's not one of those use it or lose it things, which is really nice. So if you didn't spend all the money that either you or SPU put into this HSA, it'll roll over to next year. And if you don't spend it then, it'll roll over to the next year. And depending on how your health is and on the expenses that you may have, you may roll into retirement with money in your HSA. Very similar to what we talked about with the Emeriti plan. Now it can be used for retirement as well. So the HSA money that you have can be used now and indefinitely into the future, even after you retire. It'll still be there. It's in your bank account. It doesn't get reverted back to SPU at any point. So let's look at a couple of little side-by-side comparisons real quickly. The HSA column in the middle there, the Emeriti plan over on the right-hand side. What about contributions? Well, the employer is going to, that's SPU, this year had a very generous contributions. On an ongoing basis in the future, you're more or less always going to have about half of the deductible funded, which is about $1,000 if you're an individual employee only. The Emeriti plan is almost the same amount. That 78, actually it's $81 a month now. We need to update that, but it's nearly $1,000 a year in the Emeriti plan. So SPU is actually funding both of those plans in a very similar fashion in terms of what the company, what the school is putting in. In both cases, you can also put your own money in. You can put your own money into the HSA. That one's pre-tax. You can put your own money into the Emeriti plan. That one's post-tax. Okay, there's some limits in the HSA. This year it's $3,250 for individuals. In 2014, I'm sorry, that was last year. In 2014, it's just gone up a little bit to $3,300. For family coverage, it was $6,450. Now it's gone up to $6,550 for the coming year. Again, as I mentioned before with Emeriti, there's really no limit to how much you can put in yourself if you want to. Part of the reason there's no limit is because it's post-tax, so the IRS doesn't care. Then tax treatment. Yes.
The annual limits per person, family, and all that, are those calendar year or?
Yes. Oh, these are calendar year. So for 2014, it's the $3,300 or the $6,550. So we just started 2014 last month. On the HSA, the contributions from the employer go in pre-tax, that grows with no tax, and disbursements for qualified medical expenses are no tax. So it's a triple tax advantage. Basically, the same is true on the employer contributions to Emeriti. The difference on the employees, as I've already mentioned, is that the contributions are post-tax for Emeriti, and they're pre-tax for the HSA. In both cases, you can use them for qualified health expenses, but in the Emeriti plan, of course, it's only after retirement. So that money's going to grow, and it's just going to sit there until after you retire. With an HSA, you can be spending it now. That's what it's for, is year by year while you're still employed. And if there's still money in the account, it'll roll over into retirement as well. Vesting in the HSA, it's all immediately yours. Both your money and SPU's contributions is immediately your money. It literally goes into a Chase bank account, And it's between you and God and the IRS after that, because SPU has nothing more to do with it. Whereas with the Emeriti plan, again, I mentioned there's that seven-year cliff vesting. And then the beneficiaries after death, it's available to, the HSA money is available to your spouse, no taxes. Anybody else beyond that, there's going to be some tax implications. And I already mentioned how it works for the Emeriti plan. So there's a couple of good vehicles, depending on how you want to choose your contributions, how you want to plan for your future, and how you want to look at your tax situation, that you can contribute to both the HSA if you're on that plan, and you can contribute to the Emeriti plan. Okay? All right, life insurance quickly. Accidental death and dismemberment. This is Carrie's favorite subject. If anybody's ever heard Carrie talk about this before, she gets all warm and fuzzy thinking about dismemberment, I think. Actually, she gets squeamish about it, is what she gets. So I'm sorry she's not here tonight to entertain you with her thoughts on dismemberment. But it's one of those things you kind of have to think about, sort of like death and taxes. It's part of life, or it could be, and so it's best to prepare, right? So life insurance, what is it? Well, it's providing a death benefit. If somebody passes on, if you pass on, it's providing for those that are left behind and replacing, obviously, that income that's not going to be there anymore because you're not working, because you're passed on. SPU, as most of you know, provides basic term life insurance equal to 2 times your annual salary. Term life is very basic. It doesn't build up any cash value. It simply provides a fixed amount, in this case twice your annual salary, that could be paid out upon death to your beneficiary. We also have AD&D insurance in the same amount, so it's, again, 2 times. And what AD&D does is either protects them further in case of an accidental death, that's the first AD part, accidental death, or protects in the case of loss of the ability to function with part of your body. For instance, if your hand gets cut off or you get your eye poked out. That's the part Carrie doesn't get squeamish about. So honestly, if you have a dismemberment, if you have a disability that comes along like that, this would help pay out, because you're now probably going to have, if you're declared disabled, you're going to have a loss of income or ability to use your body in the same way that you did before. That's what it's for. Now, if you put all that together, that 2 times your annual salary is going to be paid out for just any kind of a death, and another 2 times your annual salary would be paid out if it's an accidental death, I recommend for pretty much everybody in this room that if you're going to die, make sure you die in an accident. All right, that's all I got. That's all I got. So you have to think about your life insurance. What are you trying to accomplish? Who are you trying to provide for? Are you trying to provide enough to help pay off a mortgage and all the debts and everything for those you leave behind? Or are you saying, well, you know, I've pretty well taken care of that. I just need enough life insurance to pay my my burial plot. So each of us are different. There's no right or wrong answer to this, but it does help to think through, well, what makes sense for you and what do you need? How long do you plan to keep the policy? How long are you going to be able to continue using it? In our case, the term life policy that we have, at age 70, the coverage decreases by 35%. So if you're still employed, still on our plan, by age 70, it's no longer going to cover 2 times your annual salary. It's going to cover only whatever the 65% of that is. If you're still employed and still on the plan at age 75, good for you, it's only going to cover 50%. So being aware of that as well. Is it still providing what you need? Is it still worth whatever money is being put into it? In this case, that's covered by SPU if you're still employed. We do have supplemental voluntary life insurance and AD&D as well, so you can buy more than this if you want to. And that's available to you pretty much at any time. During open enrollment, we talk about it, but that's not the only time you can enroll in additional life insurance. At the time that you may leave SPU, retirement or otherwise, could you take it with you? Well, sort of. There's 2 possibilities with our life insurance that we have right now. One is called portability, the other is called conversion. The conversion is to convert it to a whole life plan, which is one of those kind of policies that builds up cash value, but they're also more expensive. So your premium is going to go way up, but you can do it. And you can take that indefinitely into the future. The other is what's called portability, which you can keep the existing plan just like it is, and I think the rates are pretty similar, but only for, I believe it's about a 2-year period. So it's kind of a bridge until you decide, do I need it anymore? Do I have something else out there to buy? So the portability, keeping it as is as term life, is pretty limited. Final thing I want to talk about, long-term disability. This is something that's also provided to employees who've worked here at least a year, and it covers your, and by the way, it's covered at no charge to you. So this is something SPU provides. You're not going to see this, you don't have to enroll in it. So it's one of those sometimes forgotten things, but it's actually a very huge advantage to you to have a long-term disability plan. If you were to be disabled for an extended period of time, you're unable to work, whether completely and fully or partially disabled, then this plan will pay up to 60% of your income at the time that you became disabled. And that would go up to age 65, generally speaking. If you're already age 62 or above when the disability occurs, then there's a period of time that could take you beyond age 65. So this is extremely handy to have, but again, if you're already over age 65, this plan wouldn't apply to you. So it depends on where you are you still working, and what do you need. But this one is provided free for people that are eligible by SPU. And again, on our website, you can find a lot more information. So, yes, ma'am.
Continue to work here after age 65, then there's no disability.
The LTD has to drop this.
I believe that's true, although I would want to double check that to make sure, but I believe that's the case, that it's no longer valid after that date. Because you're eligible for other things like Medicare at that age. Okay, any other questions? All right, well, thank you. If there's further questions afterwards, happy to talk with you. HR is always open, so as you consider connecting the dots and all these things, feel free to ask us. Okay?